Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. My name is Benjamin, and this is my ultimate Star Wars book recommendation list for beginners. I always see questions on social media. Fans are asking, hey, where's the cool Star Wars book to begin with? So I decided to go back, revise my videos, and give you a comprehensive list of what I think is a very good entry point for anyone who doesn't know anything about the Star Wars expanded universe. Now, in this video, we're briefly going to discuss what Star Wars Timeline looks like and how it functions. I'll give you the distinction between Legends and Canon, and we're going to look at different books that deal with different Star Wars time periods, like the Clone Era and, the original trilogy and so forth. Trust me, guys, with the graphics that I'm going to present you, it's going to be super snappy, easy to follow, and you will be enjoying your first Star Wars book in no time. And for a chance to win the Heart of the Jedi, the first Star Wars Legends book that was released within the last 6 years, keep watching this video, and somewhere in the middle, I will talk about this book and how you can win a free copy just by watching this video alone. Let's jump into it. Where should I start reading? What is canon versus legends? When does the story begin? The answers to these questions is right here on Star Wars Timeline. First, let's take a look at the difference between Star Wars canon and legends. We know that in 2012, George Lucas sold the franchise to Disney. And starting with 2014's show Star Wars Rebels, we begin to get the new content, including the new books, comics, video games, and so forth. So all the stuff that was released before year 2014 is considered Star Wars Legends. All the new material is called Star Wars Canon. The new Star Wars readers should know that those two are separate, okay? Think of them as two parallel universes within Marvel comic books. Same thing happens with Star Wars. Sometimes you get particular characters or planets or alien species names that are similar. Even certain events are referenced in the new canon, but as far as the storytelling goes, they're not connected. What Star Wars canon is doing is quite separate from Legends. Okay, we covered that. Next, let's take a look at what is Star Wars Timeline. Star Wars Timeline is basically a chronological order in which Star Wars major events takes place. Now, here's how to judge and understand where your particular story, whether it's a comic book or a video game or a novel, takes place. We take a look at the original Star Wars film from 1977, A New Hope. This is year zero, and this is true for Star Wars Legends and Star Wars Canon. Everything that happens before Episode 4 is called BBY. Everything that happens after Episode 4 is called ABY. And those two are basically before Battle of Yavin. Obviously, that's the attack on the first Death Star that takes place in the original movie. And all the events taking place after that event are considered after Battle of Yavin. Okay, understand me so far? Let's jump into it, and I will begin recommending Star Wars canon books so we're not confused. We begin with the current stuff. And the second segment of this video is going to be Star Wars Legends, the stuff that came before. Let's jump into it. This is basically a representation of Star Wars canon timeline. I quickly threw this together. It's basically the same model of what we're going to see later on in this video with Star Wars Legends. You will see all the major points are happening in between the Star Wars movies. You'll see all the titles there, so it's pretty simple to navigate as there are not too many Star Wars canon adult novels at this point. Alright guys, here we are. I'm super excited. Let's begin recommending books. And the first one I would like to talk about is Star Wars The High Republic. The original adult novel is called The Light of the Jedi, written by Charles Soule. This takes place about 230 years before Battle of Yavin, hundreds of years even before the prequels. I really enjoyed this book. Guys, I've been reading for 20 plus years of Star Wars Legends and canon, and this represents the very best of Star Wars literature to me. It has awesome Jedi in there. It has great action sequences. It has really awesome new villain faction called the Nile. And this is the hopeful moment for the Republic. This is where the Republic is at its very height, and the Jedi are the noble guardians of peace. So the message in this book is that we're all united for one cause. It's a very hopeful message. And again, there's tons of stuff happening here. I really, really enjoy it. Now, the second adult novel in this series, which follows the first book, is called The Rising Storm, and this one is written by Kevin Scott. This is where things plunge into the darkness. If the first book was the message of hopefulness and the Jedi are the good guys, here major stuff is happening. Like, whoa, I'm telling you, some of the most exhilarating stuff where you feel like the Jedi, who are not gods, where basically they have connection to the Force, but they're vulnerable, where they're outnumbered, who are an enemy who knows how to fight them. Really great book, some really dark moments there. There's a particular episode which basically broke my heart. So these are the two adult novels, but there are also two young reader books, which I didn't hesitate. I told myself, you know what, let me check those out, see what I think about them. And the first one is called Into the Dark. I would recommend first reading the adult novels, and if you want to expand your story and get certain characters from those adult books and their adventures and characters being explored in their full books, then you go with this one. This one is called Into the Dark, and this one is written by Claudia Gray. Claudia Gray is one of my favorite new Star Wars writers from the canon side of things. This book is really, really cool. You know, when I was reading it, my first impression was, oh, okay, you know, it's for kids. It's probably going to be much gentler, much more digestible. I was surprised. There are really some dark moments in this book where at a certain point I was reading it, I'm like, hold on a second. Is this for kids? There's some pretty dark stuff happening here. Once again, really cool introduction to some new villains here that ran gear. I'm not going to spoil who or what they are, but I thought it was a pretty interesting concept, and I can't wait to see where they take it next. So this is highly recommended for somebody who enjoyed the two adult novels and wants to explore some of those characters more and really invest in this time period. And the latest book that came out also for the young readers is called Out of the Shadows. Now, this particular book I have not read yet, but I know Justinia Ireland. I read one of her other books, and I thought she's really, really good. She knows what she's doing. I've heard a couple of good things about this from my fellow YouTubers, but again, I'm going to mention the books that I have not read. I don't know how it is personally, but it's something that I still would like to recommend. The next set of books I want to recommend are for Star Wars prequel fans. If you guys enjoyed the prequel trilogy and also have watched the Star Wars The Clone Wars show, I think you will enjoy these books as a beginner place. Now, the first book, The Master and Apprentice, is by Claudia Gray. It takes place from 40 to 32 years before Battle of Yavin, or before the prequels even. And this is the story about Qui-Gon Jinn and young Obi-Wan Kenobi. Guys, for somebody like myself, who is not even a huge prequel fan, you know, I enjoyed a couple of books from Legends era, and I decided to pick this one up. I thought it was honestly one of the best Clone era stories ever told. The way that the Master and his disciples' apprenticeship is described in this book is like no other. They go deep into the Jedi lore, the heavier parts of, you know, growing up as a young person, as this capable Jedi who's frustrated and he doesn't know what he wants to be in this galaxy. For the Obi-Wan Kenobi, really, really solid recommendation. I think any prequel fan will enjoy this book. The next one we're going to talk about has a character who is very near and dear to my heart, and it's The Dark Disciple by Chris G. Golden. This story takes place 19 years before Battle of Yavin, so it's right there almost with the episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, right before the end of the Clone Wars. And this one deals with this, what some fans prefer to call Grey Jedi Quinlan Vos. We know him from the old school Star Wars Dark Horse comic books, and here he's joined by Asajj Ventress, the character that you guys may know from the Clone Wars show. All you gotta know is know who these two characters are, and even if you don't, I suspect as long as you're prequel fans and you want to kind of like the extended story of what was happening during the final days of the Republic and the Clone Wars, you'll really enjoy this book. This has some of the darkest storytelling I've seen in the Star Wars book. It goes deep, deep into the concept where how far a Jedi could go to perform his tasks for the Jedi Order and not lose sight of, you know, the difference between the dark side, the light side, and the dark side. Really, really awesome book. Great action, fantastic characters. There's some romance going on here that I felt was very admirably done, and it does complete justice to Asajj Ventress, and there's also a very good send-off to one of the characters, which I felt was very respectfully done, and it's overall a great book to read, especially if you're a prequel fan. And the last book in this segment I want to recommend is specifically for the Clone Wars show fans. And this one is called simply Ahsoka, and it's by E.H. Johnston. I thought this was a wonderful book. This almost reads like a really solid episode from a Clone Wars show, but slightly more mature and adult version. This is especially good for the fans of the 7th season of the Clone Wars show and everything that happens with Ahsoka there. Guys, I'm not gonna spoil anything for you, but suffice it to say, If you are somebody who's a huge fan of Ahsoka, definitely read this book. It's a great starting point. Any prequels fans, I surmise, will enjoy it as much as I did. Okay, guys, let's keep going. The next book is Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. Yes, this very same Timothy Zahn responsible for the original Thrawn trilogy from the early 90s. Now, guys, if you're new to this, don't be confused. Timothy Zahn is basically a veteran Star Wars novelist who wrote the original Thrawn trilogy way back in the 90s. They were coming out in 92 and so forth, and they were considered, those legendary books in their own right, in their own day. This is his new material from canon. And what's interesting about this book, that the reason that I wanted to bring in, is that it doesn't cancel out what was created before in Legends, because the story here takes place 20 years before Battle of Yavin or before Episode 4. And the older books, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, they take place way after the original trilogy. So these two works are written in two separate timelines, right? The canon and the Legends. But this one almost serves as the prequel to the original work, which was written decades before. And I was a little bit on the cautious side. I said, okay, let's see how Timothy Zahn is able to manage this work and how much of the original content would be preserved. And I got to say, he really honors his character. Of course, Admiral Thrawn, you might have heard about him. He's one of the most prominent Star Wars Expanded Universe characters that we didn't see before on screen, before obviously Star Wars The Rebels show incorporated him, and it was the first time we saw him on screen. This novel is excellent. It is basically an origin story. It tells you how he first gets recognized in the Republic, how he meets Palpatine and how relationship blossoms, and how he starts growing in the echelons of the Republic's military. Really, really awesome novel. I highly recommend it. Timothy Zahn has already completed his second trilogy of the new Thrawn books, but here we are talking about the first one. This is honestly the first and only Thrawn book I've read so far. I'm really looking forward to the next ones. So this is the first book, and just to quickly bring the other ones, they're right here. Alliances and Treason. And that basically comprises the whole trilogy of books. So this is the new Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn, the same author who wrote the Legends books. I highly recommend these. I think this is an excellent starting point for anybody who wants to find out who Admiral Thrawn is, and this is actually his origin story. Highly recommend. Okay, I promise I'm gonna have some books which I'll recommend to video game fans, and here we go. You guys may know the recent Star Wars Battlefront games released by EA. We also have a duology of books that ties into those video games. Now, the first title, the Twilight Company, written by Alexander Freed, doesn't tie into the original game. It basically takes place during the same time, which is basically from 6 years to 0 years before Battle of Yavin. Basically, it leads up to the events that start taking place during Episode 4. And in the first original book, it doesn't have any connection to the first video game, whereas the second title by Christie Golden, Inferno Squad, that actually ties in directly with the second Battlefront game, because that was the first one out of the two that gave us actual storyline with Iden Versio, right? For those of you guys who played the video game and know who Iden Versio is, this book ties into it. Once again, I don't think you don't even need to play the video games to enjoy these two titles. I would start with number one, the Twilight Company, and I follow up with this one. What makes these two books really, really interesting is that they're very distinct. So this first book, I would describe it as, if I were to summarize in one sentence, Saving Private Ryan in a Star Wars setting. Super dark, very gritty. I really adore the fact that there are no recognizable cast members or characters in this book. It's all new cast. It's just a group of grunts, right? These military guys who are like, go out there and they perform all the tasks for the rebellion. Very, very cool. Tons of action, very gritty. It's almost like reading a Tom Clancy book set in a Star Wars world. Really nice stuff. So it's also packed with action, has these epic scenes where this book felt more like a military espionage. It does also have some action, but not as much as the first book. Here, this one focuses more on the Empire's side. And obviously we follow this young woman, Iden Versio, and her group of Imperial soldiers, and we see the war from their perspective. And it deals with stuff like military espionage and how these people being true believers and what they're fighting for, and then the rebels are the terrorists. Anyway, guys, for those of you who contemplated the kind of story that will give you an alternative view on the Star Wars universe, and you want your stories to be more like shades of gray versus, the clear black versus white, good versus evil kind of storytelling, I highly recommend this one. Both books are really, really fun, and they're very distinct from one another. I highly recommend it for video game fans. Okay, the final set of books I want to recommend from Star Wars canon are follows. These all take place during the original Star Wars trilogy, where our heroes Luke, Han, and Leia are young adventurers, and we're experiencing the events of the original saga. The first book is focused on Luke, Weapon of the Jedi by Jason Fry. The second book is called Smuggler's Run, which focuses on Han Solo, and this one is written by Greg Rucka. And the last book focuses on Leia, and it's called Moving Target, and this one is by Setzel Castellucci and Jason Fry. And the reason I recommend them all three, they are not really a trilogy, but I read them as one thing. They were basically marketed as one thing, and they really work together, because I would say these are excellent recommendations for fans who want more of young Luke, Han, and Leia. I know not all fans enjoyed Star Wars sequels, for one of the reasons being that we all wanted to see our heroes on Prime, right? We wanted to see Han, Luke, and Leia all in one cockpit, still going on their adventures and, and still kicking butt. Unfortunately, the events in those sequels and the way that those movies made gave us something different. Not all fans are fans of that. I understand that. But I think this is an excellent opportunity to go back and enjoy all of these three books. Each one of them is almost like a mini adventure. One is focused on Luke and his relationship with the Force. He's still trying to understand it. He's not very knowledgeable. It's not the same Luke we see in The Return of the Jedi. He still has a lot to learn about the Jedi lore, what it means to be a Jedi and wield this new power that he's sensing. Very, very cool book. And of course, the other two are dealing with Han Solo, who is also kind of like becoming part of this rebellion, and Princess Leia. Really, really recommend these books. And if I were to sum them up together and say why you should read all three, is that in all of my years of reading Star Wars books, I honestly don't remember authors portraying the characters so well. I mean, when you read Luke, when you read about Leia and Han, they really feel like their movie counterpart, guys. Everything from like the mannerisms to the lines that they deliver, it just feels like vintage original Star Wars stuff. And I can't recommend these more enough. I think any Star Wars fans will enjoy it. And once again, there is no prior knowledge that you need to know. All you got to know is that these books takes place during the original Star Wars trilogy. Let's keep going. Before we move on to Star Wars Legends books, I just wanted to have a quick intermission. Take a breather, relax from all of this Star Wars canon versus legend stuff, and just have a couple of recommendations which are not related to anything we've known before. The first one is obviously connected to Star Wars Visions show we saw on Disney Plus, that specific first episode, The Duel, right? This one is called Star Wars Ronin, A Vision Story. And what's cool about this one, now I haven't read it myself, but the reason I thought I would recommend it, it's a perfect entry point for any casual Star Wars fan to say, you know what, I'm going to go to a bookstore and pick up a book and just start enjoying Star Wars. I think this would be an awesome entry. I mean, the episode, if you saw it, it has all the pedigree of Star Wars, an awesome lightsaber duel, a character who looked like a Sith, very interesting lore, and you don't even know when exactly it's taking place. I'm just like, okay, interesting, what could be there? I think the possibilities are very good with this story. I heard some good things from reliable friends, but I'm not willing to say that it's a good or a bad book until I read it myself. And the second one is, remember in the beginning of this video, I mentioned this book here, The Heart of the Jedi. I actually had the pleasure to interview its author, Kenneth Flint, and this is basically a book with a really awesome story behind it. It was a book that was actually originally commissioned by Del Rey and Lucasfilm to be written way back in early 90s, and the book was completed but never was published. For some reason, Del Rey dropped it. And this book was actually self-published in 2015. I'll drop the links where you guys can go and read this book for free. There's like a PDF there on the internet. You don't have to pay a dime for it. It's absolutely free. But me, as a fan who got the chance to interview the author as well, I thought to myself, you know what? I think it would be really cool to give this book away to my fans, to fans of Kenneth Flint, who all want to enjoy this book. It's going for like some ridiculous prices on eBay. People are trying to charge hundreds of dollars for this stuff. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm giving it away for free. And for those of you who are watching this video, all you have to do is hashtag in this specific video, hashtag Heart of the Jedi. That's it. Hashtag, put it in this video, and I'll basically, somewhere by the end of this month, in the beginning of December, I'll draw a lot and I'll have like a random winner. Anybody who made a comment in this video with the Heart of the Jedi, I'll give this book for free. I promise you guys. I've done it before. You check out my videos in the channel where I actually randomly selected a person and we got lucky winners on my Facebook group, Star Wars Timeline, like posted pictures like, hey, I was a lucky one. I want a copy. Anyway, I also wanted to bring this as an example. This is the book that I did read. And once I found out, I heard about it, fans were telling me, hey, Ben, this book is on Amazon. They're selling it out real quick. Are you going to get a copy? What is this? And I was really confused. Like, what is this stuff? Oh, and then I started researching. I found out what it's all about. I'm like, yeah, I definitely want it. And I don't know why, for some reason, it clicked with me. I said, well, you know what? It looks like this book is going to be canceled out real quick. Because, it's technically a bootleg. It's a self-published book, and the author wasn't even trying to get rich with it. He was just saying, look, I want my work out there and for the fans to be able to read it. And I think it's very admirable what he has done. If you guys are curious to familiarize yourself with this work, you could check out my full interview with Kenneth Flint. I'll also drop the link in this video description so you could see what this author is all about and what was the thought process behind this book. I would highly recommend it for the original trilogy fans, and especially for the fans of The Mandalorian and the version of Luke we saw in that one. There's a scene in this book which was written basically 20 years before the Mandalorian show. And if you guys see that awesome scene with Luke Skywalker in Mandalorian, there's something that is paralleled from this book. I don't know if they're at Disney, a Del Rey or Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau were aware of this content, or if they read this book. There's some awesome similarities there. And we see past the episode 6, right? And Luke is there trying to restore the Jedi Order. And we see Luke Skywalker in his absolute prime. Anyway, it's a book I also recommend. If you want a copy of this, all you have to do is hashtag the Heart of the Jedi in this video, and I'll pick a lucky winner. Now, let's move to Star Wars Legends recommendations. Okay, folks, we're doing the same thing here. Just like with Star Wars Canon, let's take a look at Star Wars Legends. This is the full graphics. This was actually printed on the inner sleeve of every Star Wars Legends books when those were released. This is a really excellent tool and a reference point for fans to take a look at where all the novels are positioned and where the story takes place in relationship to Star Wars movies. Once again, all the books that we're talking about in this recommendation video are being highlighted, so you know exactly where they take place. So let's get on with it. Here we are. I would not call this our ultimate recommendation list if I did not talk about Star Wars Legends. And the first set of books I'd like to talk about are directly connected with the Book of Boba Fett show we're getting on Disney+. And this is the original The Mandalorian Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy of books. It's written by K.W. Jeter. The first book is called The Mandalorian Armor. It's something that I'm actually reading right now. Guys, I had this trilogy sitting on the shelf for literally years and years, and I just couldn't get to it. There's so much stuff that I read in between my Star Wars, but I finally got to it, and I gave myself a little assignment. I'm going to challenge myself and read a book per week to finish this trilogy quickly in preparation for the show. So the first one is called The Mandalorian Armor. The second one is called The Slave Ship. Here we are. And the first one is The Heart Merchandise. And I've heard about this trilogy for many, many years, and it's a humbling moment where, oh my God, guys, the very channel that you're watching, the guy did not complete his Star Wars reading. I constantly learn something new. Every day, there's constantly Star Wars Legends books that I come back to and enjoy. And this is the reason for me to pause and say, guys, don't separate the two. There's really no difference between canon or legends. They're going to be stylistically different. Some books are going to be better than the other. But I think there isn't an opportunity for anybody to jump either into Star Wars canon or legends and enjoy them all. This is what I'm doing. These books are written in the 90s. I dived into this book. I'm on chapter 10. I'm really, really enjoying it. This is really good. And, when we're going to see the show, obviously not all the stuff is going to be pulled from this book into the show. But I bet, Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau will look at it and say, are there a couple of elements, Easter eggs, we might include? Maybe a certain story thread or a story arc that we could also involve. Who knows? I would highly recommend this book as a starting point if you want to learn about the Mandalorians, if you want to learn about Boba Fett, if you want to learn about the Bounty Hunter Guild and how it all works. So far, so good. You know, I'll give you my full review when I'm done with these books, but so far this is the first on my recommendation list. Let's keep it going. Next on this list are once again some books related to video games. Let's get into it. You may remember during the days of the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, the very, very popular The Force Unleashed video game. I don't think it needs introduction. Anybody who plays games knows that video game. And of course, Part 2 also came out a couple years after. And these are two novels based on that. Now, guilty as charged. I have not finished the game. I obviously have not read these books, but I plan to do so. I'm currently replaying the first Force Unleashed on my PS3. I kind of stopped it because I said to myself, I have a Star Wars channel. So maybe I could go and replay this game and you guys could see it with me and enjoy it, as I will finish it for the first time and then I'll dive into the books. For anybody who hasn't played video games, suffice it to say, all you gotta know is the story of the original Star Wars trilogy and the fact that these books take place 3 years before Battle of Yavin, or before Episode 4. So they're right there connecting with the original trilogy. The next book I would recommend is something a little bit different. This one takes place 3 to 4 years after Episode 4, and this is called Shadows of the Empire by Steve Perry. This is regarded by many, many Star Wars fans as one of the pillars of Star Wars Legends books. It is really, really awesome. And once again, this connects into highly popular Nintendo 64 games by the same name, The Shadows of the Empire. As a matter of fact, for those of you who may not know, Shadows of the Empire was actually a whole advertising campaign. Lucasfilm was trying to basically push this book as the next sequel to Star Wars that they won't be able to film, but they want a book. It actually came out with a radio drama counterpart. They had the comic books. They had the popular video game. And it all meant to be one big storyline. I really, really enjoyed this. This is highly recommended for fans of the video games, but also for the fans of the original Star Wars saga. And all I gotta say is, once again, we see Luke in his prime, and we see a cast of very colorful and interesting new characters, and one of my favorite villains in Star Wars. And no, it's not Admiral Thrawn, it's somebody else. Hopefully we'll see him in Star Wars canon sometime in the future, but he's in this book. Highly recommend this reading. Let's keep going, guys. Okay, obviously we can't cover everything, and I'm not going to recommend books just out of the left field. I picked specific titles which I thought would be an excellent starting point. And some of you fans might think, gee, I would like to actually go back and try to experience the Star Wars storyline from the very, very beginning. What's the oldest Star Wars stories that we actually can go back to and enjoy? And here we go. The first recommendation I would like to make is the collection of short stories, which is called The Last Tribe of Sith, which is actually by John Jackson Miller, but it's a collection of short stories. It's not one novel. And the storyline here takes a place during the times of the Old Republic, from 5,000 years before Episode 4 to 3,000 years, roughly, before Episode 4. This is pretty cool introduction to that ancient Sith lore, and I think it's an excellent point for somebody who wants to jump into Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic video game, which is actually being released this month on Nintendo Switch. It's a re-release of a classic game. We're getting a full-on remake for PlayStation 5 and current-gen consoles later on, and this is an excellent introduction to that. There's one more book I want to mention. This one I also have not read. It's by Team Leban, and it actually takes place 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, before the original trilogy. This is literally the origins, the dawn of the Jedi tribe, and the creation of some faction which will later become Sith. This is where it all begins. In regards to the story, Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void, I have read the comic book counterpart to this, which actually was, like, once again, a twofold advertising campaign. They created the comic books and they said, guys, we're also going to have a novel so you can enjoy both. I heard some good things about this novel. Some fans were critical. Based on what I read in the comic books, I finished that, I believe it was 15-issue mini run with a famous comic book artist, Yondu Shema, which she did a completely amazing job on those comic books. Based on that, I actually want to go back and read some of this. This is highly recommended for fans who want to go and, read about the origins, the oldest lore that we have in the Star Wars universe, how the first progenitors of the future Jedi would be born, how their faction came about, and all that stuff. The first interactions with the Force, it's all here. It's something that to consider if you want to go all the way back. But we're gonna keep moving and keep recommending more Legends books. Let's get on with it. My next recommendation is actually quite significant. This is the first Star Wars spin-off novel ever written. It's from 1978. It's written by Alan Dean Foster, and it was commissioned by George Lucas in case that he never gets to continue his movies. He thought that if episode 4 never sells, he would be able to continue his stories in the novel format. And this is the first book that was intended to be its sequel. So I read it actually not too long ago, about 5 years ago, and I knew about its existence for many, many decades. And actually, when I read it, it was not what I expected at all. So this book I would recommend for somebody who is interested in the history of Star Wars books and the EU, how it all came about, and what are the origins of George Lucas's thought process and where he intended to take the story next. This is very, very different from The Empire Strikes Back or from what we ever see in Star Wars movies and also the books. So check this book out if you're interested in those kind of like origins ideas. The next book I want to recommend is actually the first Star Wars novel I ever read. And it's called The Truce at Bakura by Kathy Tears. And it takes place immediately after episode 6. So right after the original saga ends, I had many questions. And I wanted to learn of what happens next to Luke, Han, and Leia, where their adventures go next. And this is exactly what this book addresses. It takes place literally the next day after the movie. And I remember back in the day, it made such a huge impression on me. It was one of the first books I read in English language. I was very impressed with it. And many years after, I thought to myself, what if I go back and reread it? Is it going to have the same impact? Am I going to enjoy it just as much? And you know what? A couple of years back, quite recently, I went back and I read it again. And it was just as potent and just as exciting for me. And I thought it was such a wonderful story. And I highly recommend it for fans who want more of the adventures of the original Legacy cast. I know a lot of sequel fans would have hoped that we got, Luke, Han, and Leia still in their prime and still adventuring, but we didn't get that. If you wanted to experience more of that kind of storyline, something more closer to the Mandalorian version of Luke Skywalker when he's young and capable and in his prime, this book is for you. Let's keep going. And the next book I'm going to recommend is actually a part of a 10-book series. And this is a legendary series, arguably some of the best Star Wars books. And I mean, this is unanimously regarded by many Star Wars readers as some of the best because it's written by Michael Stackpole. Guys, he's one of the best science fiction authors I honestly ever read in or outside of Star Wars. The story here takes place 7 years after Battle of Yavin, so it's past the original trilogy, and we still have the Imperial remnants, right? There are rogue elements that are still flying around. There's admirals who take possession of remaining Imperial fleet, and here we have Wedge Antilles, who puts together a new rogue squadron. Obviously, Luke Skywalker is no longer a part of it. He goes off on his own adventures, and Wedge Antilles introduces a new cast. So what's cool about this book is we only have Wedge and one other character who pops out quickly in the movies, Taicho Kelchu. We only see his ship briefly at the end of the Return of the Jedi. But it's mainly Wedge Antilles, and it's a completely new cast of these fighter pilot jocks who are joining together to fight for now what is called the New Alliance, right? They're no longer Rebellion, they're the New Alliance. Really, really awesome book. Once again, consider it something like Tom Clancy, or even a better way of putting it would be like a Top Gun in the Star Wars universe. And most of the action that takes place in this book has to do with aerial combat. Obviously, as we continue in this franchise and we'll go to the future books, there's also ground battles and stuff like that. Highly recommend this, guys, especially for military fans who enjoy like pilots and flying and stuff like this and technology. This is one of the best books to read, and I really, really enjoy it. I think you guys might like it as well. And we're moving on. Okay, The last two items on this recommendation list that I'd like to talk about are actually two trilogies. And the first one is what is called the Young Han Solo trilogy. We begin with the first book, The Paradise Snare, which follows by The Hutt Gambit, and which finishes with Rebel Dawn. All three books are written by A.C. Crispin, with some of the most badass illustrations by Drew Struzan. You guys may know him. He's one of the most popular Star Wars illustrators. The story in this trilogy takes place 10 years before Battle of Yavin, or before Episode 4, where we see a much younger version of Han Solo. Why would I recommend this? Guys, for anyone who is a fan of Han Solo, you like gunslinging, you like his attitude, and you would like to see the origins, how he came about. And I would actually argue that some of the premise, some of the character ideas that we see in this trilogy was actually incorporated into Ron Howard's Solo, the movie. The plot is very different. The friends and enemies that he has in these books are quite different, but some of the ideas, I would say, a little bit connected. Anyway, this was also one of my favorite trilogies to read out there. I think it's superbly well done. Each book adds something more to Han Solo as a character. It shows us his process as he grows and matures. And we'll also see his vulnerable side, something that he tries to cover up at first in the original trilogy. First, he tries to be the cynical guy and tries to act around like he's a loner. He doesn't need anybody's help, right? And then Leia obviously gets through to him. But in this book, we see a more naive, more vulnerable side of Han Solo, but it still feels very much like Han Solo. I can't recommend this trilogy enough. I think any fans of Han Solo would enjoy it. And there is no other books or any other material that you honestly need to read to enjoy this book. And now we're coming to the final item on this list. Before I discuss this final item, I'd like to leave you with this message. Guys, it's all Star Wars. For me, who's somebody who is reading Star Wars since late 90s for 20 plus years, I honestly enjoy it all. There are stories in Star Wars Legends which I really adore. Some of them that I thought didn't really work. Same with Star Wars canon. There's books that I really, really love. Other titles that I read, I didn't think much of. It's all fine. I would say you as a fan, you as a Star Wars book reader, it's up to you to decide which books are good and which are not. I think there is plenty for everyone to enjoy from Star Wars canon. And I would say don't feel intimidated going back to Star Wars Legends just because they don't connect with the storylines we're currently given. It doesn't mean there is no value in them. I think some of the best Star Wars books and stories that you will ever read happen in the Star Wars Legends part of it. And the final books that I would like to recommend should be in every single recommendation list. And there is a reason I left it for the last, because I think these are the absolute pillars of what Star Wars books are all about. And it's obviously the original Timothy Zahn Thrawn trilogy, which begins with the Heir to the Empire, goes on to the Dark Force Rising, and finishes up with The Last Command. And guys, I would advise you, if you're able to find these original covers, grab these. These are just absolutely wonderful. I'm not really a huge fan with what they did with those new digitized covers. You got to go for the vintage stuff. These look absolutely fantastic. Why should you read Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy? Let me tell you why. Because in early 90s, when the original Star Wars trilogy obviously was finished in early 80s, and we honestly didn't think we would ever get Star Wars stories ever again. Yes, there were a couple of comic books and things like that, and of course the Droids show, but they were so small, nothing was ever as grand, as big as in going and enjoying Star Wars in theaters again. And the popularity of Star Wars was waning. And you don't have to take my words for it. Google it, check out the history of Star Wars. There's a period in the early mid-90s where fans thought, this is it. This is one franchise. This is going to go into the hibernation, and we're not going to find out anything about it ever again, because George Lucas kind of persisted saying that the Skywalker saga is over. This is what he said in the 90s. Here comes Timothy Zahn. He comes up with a trilogy of books, which comes at the most opportune right time, where fans are just hungry for more Star Wars material. And not only he brings new adventures, for Luke, Han, and Leia, he knocks it out of the park. We're talking about everything, the exotic planets, the new alien species, the amazing Admiral Thrawn, who is obviously so beloved. that we got him in the Rebels show. We get them into these into the Star Wars canon, where you see 6 new books about just Admiral Thrawn. I mean, it's a testament to the character. I don't need to pitch the character to you. You guys know how popular he is from the fandom. And I would say, in order to fully appreciate where it all comes from, I think in order to fully grasp the a full beauty of Star Wars expanded universe, and to really, if you want a selling point of like, should I read Legends or should I only stick with canon? Believe me, after you read this, you will be sold. You're like, oh my God, Star Wars Legends is a complete treasure trove. This book, they came out of nowhere, right? The Heart of the Jedi, that we thought after 2014, when Del Rey basically said, okay, we're going to rebrand everything that was done before. It's now Legends. We're not going to continue with this stuff again. We're only going to do canon. And I know, obviously, there were a lot of fans were very disappointed with that. They said, well, hold on a second. We want more stories like that. This is wonderful stuff to us. If you want to experience that golden era of some of the best of Star Wars writing, you have to go to the original Thrawn trilogy. I think you will really enjoy it. It has everything you would expect from the great Star Wars story. Actually, many fans argue that this would have been the most amazing proper Star Wars sequel trilogy that we would have got. Obviously, if it was filmed today, it would have looked quite different because, Carrie Fisher is no longer with us. Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, they're much, much older during the events of the new trilogy that we got. This should have been made much earlier if fans would want this as movies, but there is no reason you shouldn't go back and enjoy these as books. Sit through them, read them, and believe it or not, within the first couple of chapters, you will be absorbed in this world and you'll read some of the best Star Wars content. Anyway, I think I've talked for long enough. This is my Star Wars recommendation list. I think this is an excellent starting point with every single book that I went through in this video. And I would say that you don't need any prior reading. If you still want to know, like, hey, what are the events that take place before the book that I'm picking up? Is there important stuff that I'm missing? All you have to do is go to StarWarsWikipedia.com, research a couple of names, maybe a couple of events. But honestly, I wouldn't go with that. I would say trust your instinct. Go into these books. There will be maybe a couple of questions, a couple of events, and you're like, when did this take place? But it's not really that bad. All of these items I picked in this video, I think, are excellent starting points, and you could just sit down and enjoy them on their own. Anyway, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this recommendation video. Don't forget to leave a hashtag of the Heart of the Jedi in this video, and by the end of the month, early December, I'll pick a winner and I'll send you a free copy of this book. And no matter where you go to first, canon or Legends, I hope you guys enjoy it and celebrate Star Wars as this one great thing. Whether it's Legends, where it's canon, I think it's all great. I think you shouldn't deprive yourself of anyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Tell me in the comments below which one of these books you think was my best recommendation, and I'll talk to you later.